Imagine finding out that the physical limit of the internet, like the actual speed at which data can travel through copper and silicon, is about to hit a brick
A
wall.
very hard brick wall.
Right. And then imagine learning that one single company just dropped billions of dollars to smash right through that wall, like 3 years earlier than anyone thought was even possible. What would you do with that information?
I mean, it changes everything.
It really does. Seriously, if you had a document right in front of you that essentially gave you a crystal ball into a completely, accelerated timeline for an entire global industry, how would you process it? Because today, we are looking at exactly that kind of document.
And it is wild to read.
It is. We are digging into a highly specific, honestly fascinating set of tech and financial notes. They're excerpts from a source simply titled Eingefigter Text, and our mission for this deep dive is to decode this insider timeline, understand the massive domino effect of a single tech giant pushing an entire market forward, and extract the strategy behind front-running an exponential demand curve.
Which is an incredibly bold strategy, by the way.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this because I am honestly amazed at how just a few short sentences in a raw market note can reveal like an absolute earthquake in the global supply chain.
What's fascinating here is that we aren't looking at some polished 100-page corporate prospectus that has been sanitized by 50 different public relations committees.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. We are looking at raw, almost unfiltered market intelligence. Today is really an exercise in reading between the lines for you, the listener. We're looking at a text that makes incredibly bold claims about timeline acceleration, specifically regarding a technology referred to as CPO, and backing it up with very specific strategic financial movements.
Yeah.
To truly understand what this text is telling you, we have to look past the ticker symbols and see the actual physical machinery of the global economy shifting gears in real time.
Exactly. And before we get into those shifting gears, I think we need to stop and actually look at the catalyst driving this, like the root cause.
A prime mover.
Yes, the prime mover. The text points directly to one single, massive gravitational force in the market. It explicitly states, and I quote, NVDA is driving CPO extremely, extremely hard.
Extremely hard.
Right. But I want to pause right there because the text keeps dropping these heavy technical acronyms, CPO, and then later it mentions SIVE. Before we talk about timelines and market pushes, what actually is co-packaged optics? I mean, why is a giant like NVDA so obsessed with this? Are we talking about solving a heat issue? Is it speed? Data transfer bottlenecks?
Well, it's really about all the above, but primarily it's about the fundamental bottleneck of physics.
Okay.
For decades, data centers have relied on electricity moving through copper wires to transfer information between chips. But as computing power has exploded, especially with the demands of modern data processing, moving electrical signals over physical distances generates massive amounts of heat.
And it takes up too much energy, right?
Exactly. It's incredibly inefficient at this new scale. CPO, or co-packaged optics, combined with SIVE, which stands for silicon photonics.
Yeah.
It completely changes the game. Instead of using electricity, you use light.
Wow. Light.
Yeah. You are literally packaging the optical components, the tiny lasers that transmit data, directly onto the same silicon substrate as the processor itself.
Okay, so if traditional data centers are like commuting across town in heavy traffic to get your groceries, co-packaged optics is like physically building the grocery store inside your own kitchen.
That is an excellent way to visualize it, yeah.
It completely eliminates the travel time, the traffic jams, the energy waste of moving that data around.
You're bringing the transmission mechanism and a processing engine into the exact same house.
Right.
And because light travels faster and cooler than electricity over these tiny distances, you smash right through that physical limit we were just talking about.
Right.
But to achieve that, you need a highly specialized, entirely new manufacturing ecosystem.
And that brings us right back to that phrase in the text. NVDA is driving this extremely, extremely hard. But I'm stuck on this phrasing, extremely hard.
It's very specific.
Yeah. Usually when a massive tech giant floods a highly technical niche sector with cash and demands, it just completely breaks the smaller companies who can't handle the scale. It forces them to sprint before they can even crawl. Is that what's happening here? Like, is this creating total chaos?
It creates a specific type of controlled chaos, yes. When the text repeats extremely, extremely hard, it's not an accident. It's an indicator of sheer force.
Right.
It tells you this isn't just a casual research grant. It is an aggressive market mandate. A company of that size isn't asking the supply chain if they are ready. They're telling them they must be ready.
Wow. You will build this.
Exactly. But the text also shows us that they aren't just breaking things blindly. They are stabilizing the transition by injecting capital into specific pillars of the ecosystem. The author points to investments in related entities, specifically MRVL, YLE, and CoHR.
So these aren't just random ticker symbols thrown into a memo.
No, absolutely not. These are the financial footprints of that market mandate. By pointing to these specific entities, the text is essentially saying, don't just take my word for it that the timeline is accelerating. Look at where the capital's physically moving right now.
Following the money.
Always. These companies represent the underlying architecture required to make CPO a reality. When a dominant player decides the future needs to happen today, they deploy capital to ensure the ecosystem has the resources to survive the sprint. And because of this massive push, the primary revelation of this text drops.
The timelines.
Yes, CPO timelines are happening way earlier than expected.
Way earlier. And if NVIDIA is pushing this hard, the obvious question is, who is actually physically building it right now, which is exactly where the text goes next. The author brings in a brand new manufacturing report regarding a company called ACE. The text quotes this report directly, saying, AC reportedly to break ground on 6 new plants in 2026, CPO mass production expected to begin this year.
Massive news.
Right. And then it doubles down with another quote. It says, he also revealed for the first time that mass production of CPO is expected to begin this year. And then, slightly later, the author notes that the CPO ramp now looks like it's beginning H2 2026.
Yep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because I am looking at these dates, and I am seeing a massive, glaring paradox.
How so?
Well, wait, the report says they are breaking ground on 6 new plants in 2026, right?
Correct.
But mass production is expected to begin this year. How on earth can mass production start before the massive new plants are even built? I mean, breaking ground literally means you are just starting to dig the dirt.
Yeah.
Are they retrofitting old facilities? Are they ripping out old assembly lines in the middle of the night just to meet this early demand from NVIDIA?
This raises an important question. And it's exactly the kind of critical thinking this text demands from you as a reader. You've spotted the fundamental difference between initial commercial scale and exponential scale. Now, let's analyze that gap. The text clearly delineates between mass production starting this year and the CPO ramp beginning in the second half, or H2 of 2026.
Right, there's a distinction there.
Exactly. Mass production, in this context, likely means they have achieved the commercial viability to start producing at scale on existing retrofitted lines, exactly as you suggested. They are flipping the switch on whatever capacity they currently have available to satisfy the immediate mandate.
So they are basically hot-wiring their existing factories to get this light-based technology out the door today.
Precisely. They're making do with what they have to meet the current push. But a ramp, especially one that requires breaking ground on 6 entirely new plants, that is an entirely different beast.
That's the real scale.
Right. That is capacity expansion on a colossal, almost unfathomable scale. 6 semiconductor and photonics plants isn't some pilot program. It takes years to secure environmental permits, pour the specialized concrete, and build the hypersterile clean rooms required for silicon photonics. This is a multi-billion-dollar, industry-defining commitment.
And the text makes a point of saying this timeline was revealed for the first time.
That phrase right there is the most valuable currency in this entire document.
Yeah.
It means this is fresh, asymmetrical, market-moving intel. The broader market likely thought this grocery store in the kitchen technology, as you put it earlier, was years away from mass adoption.
Like maybe a 2028 or 2029 reality.
Exactly. Now, suddenly, the starting gun has been fired this year, and the massive 6-plant infrastructure build-out is locked in for 2026.
So if AC is already planning to tear up dirt to build these 6 massive plants by 2026, that means the orders for all the highly specialized raw materials inside those plants must be happening right now.
They have to be.
Right. How do we spot those material orders? Well, the author of the text actually lays out a highly actionable strategy for this. They pivot to how you can capitalize on this window before the rest of the market catches up. They call it front-running.
A classic strategy.
Yeah. The author explicitly says probably a good time to front-run CPO-related names around now, before ramp really picks up. And they don't just leave it vague either. They list the exact subsectors and the specific names within them. They point to SIVE for lasers, WinSemi and WISM for the foundries, and SEVI for substrates. So what does this all mean? To me, it feels like knowing a city is about to announce a massive multi-billion-dollar skyscraper district, But instead of trying to buy the prime real estate itself, you quietly go out and buy up all the concrete, steel, and glass suppliers months before the public announcement. You are front-running the physical ingredients of the boom.
It's close, but I'd actually argue a skyscraper is just static materials. This is more like trying to buy up all the specialized steel for a revolutionary new type of jet engine before the general public even knows the jet has been invented.
Oh, wow. Okay, I like that better.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is meticulously dissecting the ecosystem components required to make co-packaged optics actually function. Let's look at those ingredients you just listed.
Right. SIVE for lasers, WinSemi, and TSEM for foundries, and SIVE for substrates.
Exactly. You cannot have this technology without every single one of those foundational building blocks. As we discussed earlier, CPO uses light instead of electricity, so naturally, you need the microscopic lasers to generate that light.
Which points directly to a company like Sixawa.
Correct. But those lasers and chips don't just float in the air, right? They have to be printed and baked onto wafers. That requires highly specialized fabrication plants, which is where foundries like WinSemi and TSEM come in.
The actual manufacturing hubs.
Yes. And finally, all of these incredibly delicate optical and silicon components have to be mounted onto a foundational layer that can handle the integration. That is the substrate, which explains the inclusion of SIVE.
It's literally like a recipe. The author isn't trying to bet on the final, finished Nvidia product. They are betting on the physical bottlenecks of the manufacturing process. If you want to bake the cake, you have no choice but to buy the flour, the sugar, and the eggs from these specific suppliers.
Exactly. And what is vital for you to understand as a listener is that the author is entirely focused on the sequence of events. You front-run the raw materials now, because the foundries and the substrate manufacturers have to spin up their operations long before the final CPO product ever rolls off an assembly line.
It's incredibly methodical, but what really strikes me, and honestly it kind of makes me smile, is the tone the author takes right after listing out these ingredients.
The victory lap.
Yes. They step back and mention their previous calls regarding this exact space. They write, but basically, I was talking about front-running CPO CIF names before OFCGTC. And then they drop this absolutely fascinating sentence. They say, turned out I was right on timing again.
The question mark.
Right. There is a question mark at the end of it, but let's be real. It's not a question. It's a massive flex.
Oh, it is entirely a flex. But the thing is, it's a heavily substantiated one. The author is revealing their psychological confidence here. By referencing prior major industry events, OFC and GTC, they are pointing out to their readers that their previous predictive timeline was entirely validated by the market.
I told you so, basically.
Pretty much. And that confidence is crucial for you, as the reader, to evaluate. This isn't just someone throwing darts at a board in the dark. This is someone who has successfully mapped this specific supply chain's behavior in the past, and they are leveraging that proven track record to make an even bolder claim about the future.
And that claim about the future is honestly the most staggering part of this whole document. They don't just say demand for these lasers and substrates will grow. They say the demand curve goes up exponentially all the way past 2029, plus, and I'm sure they'll break many projections.
Exponentially.
Exponentially. We hear that word thrown around a lot in tech, sure. But in a physical manufacturing context, an exponential demand curve through the end of the decade is wild. It means whatever spreadsheet models the analysts have right now, they are completely underestimating the sheer volume of materials and foundry time that will be required.
That is the core thesis of the document, and it's where the math becomes incredibly unforgiving. When the author says they will break many projections, they mean that the traditional linear models of growth that financial analysts rely on are going to shatter against the physical reality of this demand.
Because physical things are hard to scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Human beings are notoriously bad at conceptualizing exponential growth. We naturally think in straight lines, one plant today, 2 plants tomorrow, 3 plants next year.
Right. It's steady, predictable addition.
But an exponential curve means the demand compounds on itself. It multiplies. It means those 6 massive plants breaking ground in 2026 might not even be enough to satisfy the market by 2029. The spreadsheets literally stop making sense because the supply chain physically cannot output the numbers the demand curve requires without entirely reinventing itself. And I want to address you directly on this point as the listener. Even if you aren't an investor, even if you never look at a stock ticker, this text is an absolute masterclass in reading early signals.
It really is.
It shows you exactly how the future is built behind closed doors. By paying attention to the highly technical, often unglamorous parts of a supply chain, like who makes the silicon substrates or who actually runs the foundries, you get a high-definition preview of the world years before it hits the mainstream consumer market.
It's like looking at the blueprints of a revolutionary machine before the public even realizes the old machine is obsolete.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's take a step back and recap this journey because we have covered an immense amount of ground from a very dense set of notes.
We certainly have.
We started with the sheer aggressive force of a single catalyst NVDA pushing the entire co-packaged optics market extremely, extremely hard to smash through the physical speed limits of data transfer. We saw how that gravitational pull forced the timeline to accelerate, resulting in AC scrambling to hit mass production this year, while simultaneously preparing to break ground on 6 massive new plants by 2026.
The paradox we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And finally, we decoded the author's strategy to front-run this entire phenomenon by targeting the foundational ecosystem, the lasers, the foundries, the substrates, before that demand curve goes completely exponential and breaks all existing projections past 2029.
It is a perfect cascade of cause and effect, entirely driven by one company forcing an accelerated timeline onto an entire industry.
Exactly. And the big takeaway for you listening to this deep dive is that the most valuable knowledge doesn't come from just knowing what is being built. Everyone will eventually know what co-packaged optics is. The real edge comes from mapping out the timeline of how it is built. It's about seeing the raw materials, the specific manufacturers, and the exact sequence of events before the final product ever hits the stage.
Which leaves us with a critical, much larger question to think about. We've spent all our time today looking at the incredible pull this CPO acceleration has on its own specific supply chain.
Right.
But resources on this planet, whether it's specialized engineering talent, raw rare earth materials, or industrial cleanroom components, are finite.
Yeah, there's only so much to go around.
Exactly. If this single technology is forcing a massive global supply chain to accelerate its timeline, break all existing projections, and pull immense physical manufacturing resources into building 6 new plants by 2026, what hidden bottlenecks or critical shortages in completely other global industries will this sudden, massive resource drain expose?